She was the only one who offered water to the gardener. Then he revealed he was the Duke. It was one of those August afternoons where the air feels heavy and still, like it is just sitting on top of you and refusing to move. The kind of heat that makes people grumpy, slow, and selfish. Nobody wants to do anything nice for anyone when the sun is that mean. The estate was large. Old stone walls, long gravel paths, flower beds arranged so perfectly they looked almost fake. The kind of place where everyone knows their place and nobody steps out of it. The staff moved around it quietly, like they were always aware of being watched. The guests arrived in carriages and barely looked at the people holding the doors open for them. There was a young woman, the daughter of a tenant family, who lived just beyond the eastern edge of the estate grounds. She was not staff exactly. She was not a guest either. She was somewhere in between, which in those days meant she was nobody that anyone paid much attention to. She had come to deliver something to the kitchen, a basket of herbs her mother had promised the cook, a simple errand. The kind that takes 20 minutes and is forgotten by the time you sit down for supper. But before she reached the kitchen door, she stopped. There was a man in the garden. He was crouched low near the rose beds, pulling weeds with his bare hands. No gloves, no hat. His shirt was dark at the back from the heat, and his hair was damp at the edges. He was working slowly and carefully, the way someone works when they are not in a hurry and do not need to prove anything to anyone. She stood there for a moment and just looked. Not because he was interesting, not for any particular reason. She looked because she was tired from the walk, and it was easier to stand still for a second than to keep moving in that heat. Then she noticed the water. She was carrying a clay jug. Her mother had sent it with her for the walk, filled with cool water from the well. It was heavy, and she had been switching it from hand to hand the entire way. She had been thinking about drinking it herself. She had earned it honestly in that heat. But she looked at the man in the garden and thought, he looks like he needs it more. That was the whole thought. Nothing complicated about it. Just that. She walked over to him. He did not hear her coming. His focus was entirely on the weeds. So when she said quietly, "Excuse me," he startled a little and looked up. She held out the jug. "You look like you could use some water," she said. Very simple. Very plain. He looked at her for a moment. Then he looked at the jug. Then he looked at her again. There was something in his expression she could not quite read. Not confusion exactly, more like surprise, at a thing he had not expected to feel surprised by. "Thank you," he said, and took it. He drank. Not quickly, not greedily. Slowly, like he was actually tasting it. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. Not a handkerchief, just his hand, and passed it back. "That is very kind," he said. She shrugged a little, took the jug back, and said something like, "It is nothing. It is just water." And then she continued on to the kitchen to deliver the herbs. That was it. The whole exchange took maybe 2 minutes. She did not think much about it on the walk home. But there was a moment, just before she turned away from him, when she noticed something she could not quite place. It was the way he sat. Not hunched the way people sit when they are exhausted and just getting through the work. He sat like someone who had chosen to be there. Like the garden was a place he had come to on purpose, not out of duty. She thought, odd gardener, and then she stopped thinking about it. 3 days later, there was a gathering at the estate. A small dinner, but important. The kind where the table is set perfectly, and everyone wears their best and speaks carefully. The tenant families were not invited to the dinner itself, but there was a tradition at this particular estate where some of the longer-standing families from the surrounding land were welcomed into the courtyard afterward, for something more informal. Her family was among them. She came with her mother and father. She wore the good dress. She was not excited about it. She never was, for these things. She was the kind of person who preferred the walk home to the event itself. They were standing in the courtyard, her mother talking to someone she recognized, her father nodding along to a conversation he was not very interested in, when the doors to the main hall opened. Several people came out, guests of the estate, people of standing, well-dressed, moving with the easy confidence of those who have never had to wonder if they belong somewhere. And there, among them, was the man from the garden. She almost did not recognize him. Not because he looked entirely different. The face was the same, the calm in the eyes was the same, but because everything around him was different. He was dressed properly now, and the people beside him were looking at him the way people look at someone important. Not performing attention, just giving it, the way you naturally give your attention to the person who holds the weight of a room. She stared. She could not help it, and then she heard someone near her say his name, and the title that came before it, Duke. She felt something go very still inside her chest. She looked down at her hands. She thought strangely about the clay jug, how heavy it had been, how she had almost not offered it, how for a split second she had thought, I need this myself. Across the courtyard, he was speaking to someone, nodding. Then, for a reason she could not explain, instinct, maybe, or just coincidence, he looked up. His eyes found her immediately, like he had already known exactly where she was standing. He did not smile in a grand or obvious way, just a small one, the kind that is only for the person it is meant for. And then he said something to the person beside him, excused himself quietly, and walked over. She had nowhere to go. She stood her ground. I did not properly introduce myself the other day, he said when he reached her. His voice was the same as it had been in the garden, quiet, unhurried. I apologize for that. You were gardening, she said. She did not know why she said that. It just came out. A pause. Then, I find it helps me think. She looked at him. He looked at her. There was a lot being said in that, and none of it was being said out loud. The water was good, he added. I had been out there for 2 hours. I had not thought to bring any. That seems like an oversight, she said. He almost smiled again. It was. Yes. Her mother had noticed by now. She could feel it without looking, that particular stillness that mothers get when they are paying very close attention and trying to look like they are not. He asked her name. She told him. He said it back to her. Once, like he was making sure he had it right. There was something deliberate about that, about making sure. Then someone called for him from across the courtyard and he had to go. He excused himself properly, with a small bow that felt genuine rather than formal, and walked back. She watched him go. Later that night, walking home with her family, her mother could not stop talking about it. The Duke had come and spoken to her. The Duke had asked her name. Did she know who that was? Did she understand what that meant? What had she said to him? Had she been polite? Of course she had been polite. She was always polite. But had she been, the right kind of polite? She answered her mother's questions in the order they came, patiently, and did not say what she was actually thinking. What she was thinking was much simpler than all of that. She was thinking about the moment she had almost not offered him the water. How she had stood there for 1 second, in that terrible heat, and thought about keeping it for herself. How a very ordinary piece of selfishness had almost won out over a very ordinary piece of kindness. She was thinking, what if I had just walked past? Not because of who he turned out to be, not because of his title, or the way people looked at him, or what her mother thought it might mean for the family, but because of the thing he had said in the garden, after she handed him the jug. Not the thank you, the other thing, the thing he said when she started to walk away. He had said, most people don't, just that. Quietly, almost to himself. She had not stopped to ask what he meant. She had just nodded and kept walking. But she understood it now. He had spent that afternoon in his own garden, doing work he did not need to do, and in 2 hours, not one person, not a guest, not a member of staff, not anyone, had thought to offer him water. Because nobody had looked at him and seen a person first. They had seen a position, a title, a role, or they had seen what looked like a gardener and decided he was not worth the pause. She had looked at him and seen a man who was hot and tired and thirsty. That was the whole thing. That was all of it. There is a version of this story that people tell because of what happened next, because something did happen next, and it was significant, and it changed the shape of her life in ways she had not planned for and could not have predicted. People like that part of the story. It is satisfying, but that is not the part that stayed with her. What stayed with her was the weight of the jug on the walk over, the moment of hesitation, the small, quiet choice to cross a few feet of garden and hand a stranger some water. She did not do it because she thought it would matter. She did not do it because she wanted anything. She did it because it was hot, and he looked thirsty and she had water, and it seemed like the obvious thing. Sometimes the obvious thing is the only thing that needs to happen. And sometimes, without knowing it, you hand a cup of water to the one person in the world who needed to be reminded that kindness still existed, and that reminder changes something in both of you, quietly, permanently, in a way that no grand gesture ever could. The jug was heavy on the walk home, too, but for a different reason.